E3 as a convention is incestuous. What I mean by that is that it tackles the industry from a deliberate perspective of delusional hype with a disregard for accuracy and honesty. I have been to E3. It was fun, but not because it contained an overabundance of utility or value. It was fun because I attended with a group of upper echelon core team members and also got to see Cyberpunk 2077 because I've been able to establish a relationship with CD Projekt Red. The convention as a whole, however, by and large, this is a bit of a generalization here, specific panels and reveals will of course diverge from this average, but by and large, it is a dishonest corporate cesspool of false advertising and broken promises. E3, for those that do not know, is the Electronic Entertainment Expo, put on by the ESA, also known as the Entertainment Software Association. The ESA is mainly comprised of large gaming and tech-related companies like Electronic Arts, Bethesda, Take-Two Interactive, Tencent, Ubisoft, and many more. The premise behind E3 is to generate as much industrial hype as is humanly possible in a compressed time span. This is the ultimate crossover between gaming media, content creators, and developers/publishers, with a 4 or so day period of non-stop shilling, deal brokering, and corporate snakespeak. Now, this is probably a good time to say that there are certainly positive elements to the convention, but keep in mind E3 is what brought us things like this, and it is the primary platform in which the goal of explosive marketing eclipses the necessity for truth and honesty, resulting in a pathetic infrastructure of hype-driven buyer's remorse. I have covered the convention in the past, and my opinion was the same both then and now. The convention on average is designed to manipulate, lie, and deceive while furthering a corporate bottom line, but this year, the known issues have been subverted by gross negligence and data protection violations. The topic is a bit complex here. Essentially, to summarize, a public page on the E3 website contained a spreadsheet which held information such as phone number, home address, email, and various other details of around 2,000 attendees such as media, YouTubers, streamers, and journalists. This issue was discovered by a YouTuber named Sophia Narwitz, who then contacted the ESA to remedy the situation, and when the page was taken down, displaying a 404 error, published a video on the subject. This is where it gets complicated. The page was down, but the info was not necessarily gone, and I won't spend an overabundance of time on the specifics of how that transpired exactly, but effectively the information was still fully available, and at this point, as most things in the end inevitably are, it is etched into the permanence of the online world. The reaction to this has been somewhat diverse. Mainstream gaming media has largely covered the topic already, with opinions that range from complete panic to denial and obfuscation. The most interesting thing, however, is the verbiage used by many of these articles that very precisely echoes an official statement from the ESA themselves. A large amount of the coverage cites the ESA claim that a website vulnerability that led to the contact list of registered journalists attending E3 being made public. Furthermore, the ESA statement expands on this with the following. The Entertainment Software Association, ESA, was made aware yesterday of a website vulnerability on the exhibitor portal section of the E3 website. Unfortunately, a vulnerability was exploited, and that list became public. This is a lie, but the vast majority of media have ignored that fact and covered the story from an entirely different perspective. A website vulnerability being exploited very pointedly means that it was unintended, and a broken mechanic was either brute forced or otherwise manipulated so as to breach protective measures. The ESA data leak was not protected by anything. There was no exploitation of a vulnerability. It was simply displayed for anyone who wanted to click the link on their website under a page titled Helpful Links. Claiming that as exploitation of a vulnerability is like saying that by clicking my profile on YouTube and seeing my videos, you are exploiting a vulnerability in the YouTube platform. It's asinine. While some media has successfully evaluated the inconsistency in these statements, other journalists have adopted a bit of a different strategy. Someone like Jason Schreier from Kotaku have attached the spin that Sophia Narwitz, through negligent coverage in a rush to publish the information quickly, inadvertently caused this problem when it otherwise might never have been an issue. This is decisive idiocy. Sophia Narwitz herself has addressed this criticism with a timeline of events on her page, and when considering the full scope of the issue, her coverage cannot honestly be attributed in any way, shape, or form to the underlying issue of gross negligence. The information existed regardless of whether or not her video covered the topic. It had been and was continuing to be accessed by anyone who clicked the link. Not only have some outlets aimed criticism at her for covering the story, others have outright ignored that she spearheaded the topic in the first place, and the mindset as to why is anything but reasonable. Sophia Narwitz has covered topics like Zoe Quinn and her Kickstarter campaign, among other subjects attributed to the Gamergate era. Now, Gamergate is anything but straightforward, and I won't even go into that subject because there really isn't any sort of summary or explanation that would universally be accepted as adequate or even accurate. So I'll just say that it was a controversy that stretched very far and resulted in tension between gamers, independent creators, and journalists. Regardless of where you fall on Gamergate, or any controversy for that matter, past beliefs do not necessarily invalidate current reporting. I could agree or disagree with Sophia Narwitz and her coverage of Zoe Quinn's Kickstarter, but it's irrelevant either way, just as I can agree or disagree with Jason Schreier's coverage of one game, but it does not invalidate his future or current articles on gaming as a whole by default. As of right now, angry journalists seem to be forgetting this. This brings us to the reason behind the complexity. Mainstream gaming media is closely interconnected with the ESA. The ESA's corporate parties are some of the pivotal engines behind the literal exclusivity that perpetuates a large chunk of gaming media relevancy, and as a result, any possible avenue to decrease liability towards these symbiotic partners is seen as an appealing option. Furthermore, in the modern days of Metacritic victim score, there cannot be a wasted opportunity to profess fear of harassment, or project an atmosphere that reiterates the prevailing and desirable narrative of toxic gamer culture pushed by mainstream media. This lands us in an interesting situation. How do journalists project maximum victimhood points while also mitigating accountability for the ESA? And the answer is shoot the messenger. I should clarify it's not all outlets and certainly not all journalists, but a larger than is reasonable cross-section have adopted the tactic of projecting a sense of responsibility towards Sophia Narwitz herself while decrying the doxing of their personal information as dangerous to their safety, but refusing to take primary and more vitriolic focus on the ESA despite its unequivocal and solely exclusive accountability. But this begs the question, where does it lead? Keep in mind this next section is overrun with my own speculation, but it seems apparent to me that the result will be a downturn and rapidly following death of E3 as a convention, at least considering its current form. The ESA has already been fairly vocal about the need for a change in the E3 format. The stagnant construction of the convention is layered with issues above and beyond personal information breaches, but this will likely be the icing on the cake. Of the 2,000 individuals who had their information leaked, there was a fairly large cross-section of powerful industry players, large YouTubers, streamers, independent journalists, even Wall Street hedge fund employees, and corporate officials. We currently live in an era where swatting is a somewhat normal occurrence, so focusing on streamers for just a moment here, the risk of them being subjected to this dangerous prank, though it really should not be called a prank by any stretch, it is anything but amusing, the risk has dramatically increased merely because they attended the convention. To shift over to other categories here, YouTubers, journalists, even corporate officials often have a very real need to keep their information private. I myself incorporated Upper Echelon as an LLC and even then also secured a registered agent and PO box to layer in protection for my own personal information. The fact that the ESA directly facilitated a breach for over 2,000 individuals of private information is a blow to the credibility and security of the entire convention. Still, another angle is legal ramifications. I won't dive too deep into specifics here, but GDPR regulations will be a factor to consider alongside class action lawsuits and civil cases pertaining to data protection. I don't see any major developments on that front being all that likely, but the potential certainly exists. As E3 2020 rolls around, with the already established erosion of credibility and relevance for the convention, as an example of declining relevance, look no further than Sony, which skipped this year's showcase outright despite having attended every single previous year. This might be a function of the approaching PlayStation 5, I'm not sure, and a lack of popular games to showcase, but that has never stopped them in the past, and to me indicates a decline in the convention's appeal as the shroud between expectation and reality becomes increasingly thin. As the next iterations of E3 roll around, however, with the now scandalous breach of data simply by attending for individuals who may have an extremely pressing and legitimate need to keep that information private, it will be a stain on the desirability of attendance, which will expedite the necrosis of what is effectively a dead convention walking. E3 is rapidly losing consumer trust. It's their own fault as companies lie and manipulate with little to no regard for honesty or integrity, but the ESA, and by extension the convention itself, have now lost, at least partially, the trust of any speculative attendees. It may persist for a few more years, but I find it doubtful. At the very least, a revamp is needed because from top to bottom, especially considering the now public nature of the conference leading to excessive wait times, while the reveals are live-streamed worldwide and can be watched from the comfort of one's own home without even going, the convention as a traditional physical event is flawed to a point of negative value overall. As the convention itself declines in value, there is a simultaneous decline in media trust. While independent YouTubers and other creators thrive and grow, traditional media struggles to maintain relevancy, and as that progression continues, events such as E3, which blatantly emphasize corporate cockstroking, will continue to lose credibility. At this point, I want to add a purposefully antagonistic conclusion. Mainstream gaming journalists no doubt despise my channel and content. If they even watch it, that is, they are usually enveloped in a solid echo chamber. But I want to very precisely draw attention to the last instance in which one of them took a swing at me. A writer for CNET decided to smear my channel and content, which directly facilitated, after my retaliation, the 2 largest consecutive days of growth my channel has ever seen, with a corresponding revenue bump as well. With the recent Sophia Narwitz situation, it has become clear, at least in my own opinion, that there is a phenomenon of perceived weakness. A larger than is reasonable number of people piled onto the topic with the intention to degrade and attack her content and credibility. But these same journalists, on average, will typically avoid any target that is large enough so as to project an aura of potential resistance. My challenge is this: either do your job better or muster enough fortitude to actually clash with individuals that have a mental predisposition to relish that conflict and are equipped to viciously tear down your smear tactics through articulation and critical thought. You won't do it because you are inadequate and inferior. Otherwise, most of you, gaming journalists that is, specifically, would be writing for political outlets or doing investigative journalism on humanitarian issues or criminal reporting, etc., etc. But that's it. E3 is a dying convention, and this latest data breach just chummed the waters. If you want to support, check out the links down below. The idea is to fully shift to Patreon as a primary mode of monetization, rather than rely on YouTube's biased algorithm, but nothing is really required. The content will persist regardless. There are other links as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.